Hi and welcome back to another video. Today I'll be talking about 5 things that make my anxiety worse, and we'll be highlighting ways to deal with it. Over the years, I've noticed a connection between my levels of anxiety and the lifestyle I live, and that there are certain substances, for example, that can impact my anxiety. This brings me to the first thing that makes my anxiety worse, and that is stimulants. Stimulants like caffeine and nicotine are easily available, while sugar is found in pretty much everything we eat and drink nowadays. I realize that there are many of us who cannot do without at least one of these in daily life, and that many people I know rely on beverages like coffee or tea to get them up in the morning or to keep them focused at work. In my case, I find that stimulants, in general, tend to have a bad effect on me, as I'm prone to agitation, and consuming caffeinated beverages, for example, can quickly lead to an increase in stress. I also find that things like coffee can disrupt my sleep patterns, and that in the most extreme case can activate a fight or flight response, which can then make typically uninterested situations become quite uncomfortable. On the other hand, there have been rare times that I felt lethargic to the point that coffee has helped me to wake up. I guess it really has to do with one's tolerance level along with the situation. Opposite to stimulants, the next on my list is passivity. I've noticed that being too passive can also lead to an increase in anxiety, and that it's all too easy to interrupt a healthy routine in exchange for short-term amusements like video games or movies. In fact, there have been times when I've spent long hours on the computer and that it has nearly always had a cost on my productivity. At other times, I found it easy to use my anxiety as an excuse to get myself into a state of laziness that I find really hard to get out of. Whenever I get to this point, motivation is usually all but gone, and doing the smallest thing feels like a heroic task. That's when I know that things have gotten bad. The way I avoid getting into the cycle of laziness and passivity is by being deliberately productive in daily life. And by productive, I mean getting any number of things done in one day, as it really doesn't matter how small or simple the task might be, just as long as I know I've done it. Being productive in this way gives me a sense of being in control of my time and serves as a kind of catalyst that keeps me actively engaged in various activities. At the same time, I've also found that being active gives back a rewarding sense of satisfaction, which in turn keeps me motivated and relatively stress-free. At other times, however, being productive exposes my propensity to make mistakes, and this brings me to the next thing on my list, which is anger. Similar to other emotions, I find that anger sticks easily in my mind. It is hard to get away from. In my younger days, for example, I used to find myself often getting angry over small things, and that the angrier I got about something, the harder it was to let things go. This would usually result in the situation playing out in my mind on a loop, a bit like a broken record. In the end, I usually managed to calm down, but the feeling of anxiousness and agitation remained long after the event took place. This lingering feeling of disturbance would in itself keep me primed to get angry, and the cycle would continue. As one can imagine, this downward spiral didn't help my anxiety and was a real struggle to get out of. Over time, however, I found that a good way to break out of this pattern was to actively remove myself from the situation that was making me angry, and then to quietly reflect on that anger for as long as it took to cool off. By doing this, I found that as I calmed down, it became easier to look at the situation more objectively and to come up with practical solutions and ways to deal with whatever had angered me. Apart from anger, another state of mind that I find hard to get out of is obsessiveness. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to get caught up with an activity to the point of not being able to let it go. And no matter how tired or exhausting I might be feeling, that it's very difficult to stop until the activity has been completed. There have been times, for example, when I've spent ridiculous amounts of time obsessing over things that bothered me or over things that I might have wanted, and that the more time I spent obsessing, the more energy it drew away from getting things done. I found that a good antidote to obsessing is to purposely take regular breaks to do something else that is completely unrelated. I also find it helpful to remind myself that not finishing an activity in one go is not the end of the world, and that it's okay to take time to get it done. With this attitude, I found it easier to keep anxiety and stress at a minimum while improving the quality of my work. This brings me to the 5th and last thing on my list that impacts my anxiety, and that is worry. I don't know about you, but I find it all too easy to get stuck in an unending loop of concern and start spending time imagining how things could go wrong in any given situation. and as a result, I tend to waste hours at a time worrying about problems that aren't there. My consolation, however, is that the things that I tend to worry about could realistically happen, such as having a car accident or losing my belongings in a public place. But therein lies the problem: how to stop worrying about potentially endless things. Well, fortunately, I found a simple solution that helps me to deal with worry, and that is for me to spend time preparing on whatever might be a cause for concern, rather than sitting around and worrying about it. By addressing worries in this way, I found it to be a great way to anticipate problems while keeping my mind focused and proactive. In any case, I found that the situations I had actually anticipated ended up turning out differently from my expectations, but nevertheless, I'm glad to have spent that time preparing. This brings me to the end of this video. Please feel free to let me know down in the comments section below your top 5 things that make your anxiety worse and how you cope with them. Next time, I look forward to sharing with you how memories affect my anxiety and ways to deal with stressful situations from the past. Until then, thank you for watching and see you next time.